Welcome to my channel. Emma stood at the kitchen window, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as she watched the rain streak down the glass. The morning light was dull, filtered through heavy gray clouds, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator was the only sound breaking the silence. She glanced at the clock. 7:42 a.m. Daniel had already left for work, his half-empty cereal bowl still on the table. She sighed, the familiar ache of loneliness settling in her chest. It wasn't always like this. 5 years ago, when they first married, Daniel would linger over breakfast, his hand brushing hers as they shared stories about their dreams. But now his corporate job consumed him. Late nights at the office, early morning meetings, and weekend conference calls had become the norm. Emma understood his ambition, but the distance between them had grown into a chasm she didn't know how to bridge. She set her cup in the sink and wandered into her studio, a small room at the back of the house filled with canvases, paints, and the faint scent of turpentine. Art had always been her escape, a way to channel her emotions when words failed her. Lately, though, even her brushes felt heavy, her inspiration stifled by the weight of her unspoken frustrations. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah, her best friend since college. Sarah ***, hey, you free for lunch today? I need to vent about my latest dating disaster. Emma smiled faintly. Sarah's chaotic love life was a constant source of entertainment, but today, the idea of listening to someone else's problems felt exhausting. Still, she needed to get out of the house. Emma ***, sure. Noon at the usual spot. She spent the next few hours sketching aimlessly, her mind drifting between memories of happier times with Daniel and the gnawing sense of dissatisfaction she couldn't shake. By the time she arrived at the cafe, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under a pale sun. Sarah was already seated at their favorite table, her auburn hair tied up in a messy bun. She waved Emma over, her face lighting up with a grin. You look like you've been through a war. What's going on? Emma slid into the chair across from her, picking at the edge of the menu. Just the usual. Daniel's working late again, and I feel like I'm talking to a brick wall most days. Sarah's expression softened. Have you told him how you feel? I've tried, Emma said, her voice tinged with frustration. But he just says he's doing it for us, for our future. And I get that, but I don't know. It's like we're living parallel lives instead of sharing one. Before Sarah could respond, a familiar voice interrupted them. Emma, is that you? She turned, her breath catching in her throat. Standing beside their table was Liam, his tousled dark hair and easy smile exactly as she remembered. It had been years since she'd seen him, since he left town to pursue his music career, but time had only sharpened his features, adding a rugged edge to his boyish charm. Liam, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? Just passing through, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'm back in town for a while, actually. Thought I'd see if the old gang was still around. Emma introduced him to Sarah, her heart racing as they exchanged pleasantries. There was something about Liam's presence that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. When he mentioned his upcoming art gallery opening and invited her to attend, she agreed without hesitation, ignoring the flicker of guilt that sparked in her chest. As Liam walked away, Sarah raised an eyebrow. Well, that was interesting. Emma shook her head, trying to dismiss the flutter in her stomach. It's nothing. Just catching up with an old friend. But deep down she knew it was more than that. That night, as she lay in bed waiting for Daniel to come home, she couldn't stop thinking about Liam's smile, the way his voice had softened when he said her name. For the first time in months, she felt seen, and the thrill of it was intoxicating. When Daniel finally slipped into bed beside her, his breathing steady and deep within minutes, Emma stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She knew she was standing on the edge of something dangerous, but the pull was too strong to resist. The spark of temptation had been lit, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to extinguish it. The gallery was bathed in a soft golden glow, the walls adorned with vibrant paintings that seemed to pulse with life. Emma stood near the entrance, her fingers nervously toying with the strap of her clutch. She had told Daniel she was meeting Sarah for dinner, a small lie that left a bitter taste in her mouth. But the pull of Liam's invitation had been too strong to resist. When she spotted him across the room, her breath caught in her throat. He was dressed in a fitted black blazer, his dark hair slightly tousled, and his smile as warm as she remembered. He noticed her almost immediately and made his way over, his eyes lighting up with genuine delight. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth and familiar. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "But I couldn't miss seeing your work. It's been so long." Liam gestured to the paintings around them, his pride evident. "It's been a journey, but I'm finally where I want to be." "Well, almost." There was a weight to his words, a hint of something unspoken, but Emma didn't press. Instead, she let him guide her through the gallery, his hand occasionally brushing against her arm as he explained the inspiration behind each piece. His passion was infectious, and for the first time in months, Emma felt a spark of excitement. As the evening wore on, they found themselves in a quiet corner, sharing a bottle of wine and reminiscing about the past. Liam's laughter was easy, his stories vivid, and Emma found herself leaning in closer, drawn to the warmth of his presence. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" Liam asked suddenly, his tone shifting. Emma hesitated, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" "You and me," he said, his gaze steady. "We always had this connection even back then. I always wondered if we missed our chance." The air between them grew heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Emma looked away, her mind racing. She had thought about it, of course, those fleeting moments in their youth when their friendship had teetered on the edge of something more. But she had chosen Daniel, and Liam had chosen his music. "Liam, she began, but her voice faltered. He reached for her hand, his touch sending a jolt through her. "I'm not saying this to complicate things. I just needed you to know." Emma's chest tightened, her emotions a tangled mess of guilt and longing. She pulled her hand away, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm married, Liam." "I know," he said softly. "And I respect that. But I also know you're not happy. I can see it in your eyes." His words struck a nerve, and Emma felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crack. She wanted to deny it, to defend her marriage, but the truth was harder to ignore. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, their conversation lingering in the back of her mind like a shadow. When Liam offered to walk her to her car, she didn't refuse. The night air was cool, the streets quiet as they made their way down the sidewalk. "Thank you for coming," Liam said as they reached her car. "It meant a lot to me." Emma nodded, her throat tight. "I'm glad I did." For a moment, they stood there in silence, the space between them charged with unspoken words. Then, without warning, Liam stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Emma's breath hitched, her heart pounding as she looked up at him. "I've missed you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Before she could respond, his lips brushed against hers, soft and tentative. Emma froze, her mind screaming at her to pull away, but her body betrayed her, leaning into the kiss. It was brief, but it left her trembling, her emotions in turmoil. When Liam finally stepped back, his expression was a mix of regret and hope. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have done that." Emma shook her head, her voice shaky. "No, you shouldn't have." But even as she said the words, she knew the damage was done. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. As she drove home, her hands gripping the steering wheel, Emma replayed the kiss over and over in her mind. Guilt gnawed at her, but beneath it was a flicker of something else, something dangerous and exhilarating. When she walked into the house, Daniel was asleep on the couch, his laptop still open on the coffee table. She stood there for a moment, watching him, the weight of her betrayal settling heavily on her chest. She had always believed she was stronger than this, that she would never be the kind of person to cheat. But as she climbed into bed, the memory of Liam's kiss still lingering on her lips, she realized how easily the lines could blur. The spark of temptation had ignited, and now it threatened to consume her. The days that followed the gallery opening were a blur of stolen glances and hushed conversations. Emma found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, her guilt warring with the thrill of Liam's attention. They began texting regularly, their messages growing more intimate with each passing day. She told herself it was harmless, just two old friends reconnecting, but deep down she knew the truth. Daniel, oblivious to the storm brewing in his wife's heart, continued his relentless work schedule. He came home late each night, his exhaustion evident in the shadows under his eyes and the way he barely spoke during dinner. Emma tried to bridge the gap between them, but every attempt felt hollow, her mind constantly drifting to Liam. One evening, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her messages with Liam, Daniel walked in, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled. He dropped his briefcase by the door and sank into the chair across from her, letting out a heavy sigh. "Long day?" Emma asked, forcing a smile. "The longest," he replied, rubbing his temples. "I'm sorry I've been so busy lately. I know I haven't been around much." Emma's chest tightened with guilt. "It's okay. I understand." But it wasn't okay. The distance between them felt insurmountable, and the weight of her secret only made it worse. The next morning, Emma woke to an empty bed, the sheets cold on Daniel's side. She checked her phone and saw a message from Liam. "Liam ***, I'm at the studio today. Come by if you're free, ***. Her heart raced as she typed a reply. "Emma ***, I'll be there." She told herself it was just to see his new work, to support him as a friend. But as she drove to his studio, her hands gripping the steering wheel, she knew it was more than that. Liam's studio was a converted loft in the heart of the city, its large windows flooding the space with natural light. When Emma walked in, he was standing in front of a canvas, his sleeves rolled up and paint smudged on his hands. He turned when he heard her, his face breaking into a smile. "You made it," he said, setting down his brush. Emma nodded, her eyes scanning the room. The walls were covered in his work, each piece more vibrant and expressive than the last. "It's amazing, Liam. You've really found your voice." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "I've been inspired lately." There was a pause, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Then, without warning, Liam reached for her hand, his touch sending a jolt through her. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "I can't stop thinking about you." Her breath caught, her heart pounding in her chest. "Liam, we can't." But he cut her off, his lips pressing against hers in a kiss that was anything but tentative. It was fierce, desperate, and for a moment, Emma forgot everything, her marriage, her guilt, her promises to herself. She kissed him back, her hands tangling in his hair as the world around them faded away. When they finally pulled apart, Emma's legs felt unsteady, her mind reeling. "This is wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It doesn't feel wrong," Liam said, his eyes searching hers. "It feels like we're finally being honest." Emma shook her head, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "I can't do this to Daniel." Liam stepped back, his expression softening. "I'm not asking you to choose. I needed you to know how I feel." Emma turned away, her emotions a tangled mess. She wanted to believe him, to let herself fall into the comfort of his affection. But the guilt was overwhelming, a constant reminder of the life she was betraying. When she returned home that evening, Daniel was in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up as he attempted to cook dinner. The sight of him, so earnest, so unaware, broke her heart. "Hey," he said, looking up with a smile. "I thought I'd try to make us something nice for a change." Emma forced a smile, her chest aching. "It smells great." But as she sat down at the table, the weight of her secret pressed down on her, suffocating and inescapable. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, torn between two worlds. That night, as she lay in bed beside Daniel, she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had reached a breaking point, and the choices she made next would define the rest of her life. The spark of temptation had ignited a fire, and now it threatened to consume everything in its path.